Pastor Ryan Hodgins here with Revive Youth Rally. Today we have a webinar to present to you with Dr. Allan Martin from Younger Generation Church in Texas. You are going to enjoy this as we talk about the growing young movement from Fuller and how it can impact your church and your life. So I want to introduce to you Allan Martin so that he can lead you in through this. But first, I also want to tell you about our youth rally. We are putting together a really powerful youth rally that you're going to want to bring your young people to. You can check more out about that at www.reviveyouthrally.com. Also, regularly we are releasing podcasts. You can find it on iTunes or most other podcasting platforms, Revive Youth Leader Podcast. And there we have some awesome episodes and some great ones coming up. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to be recording one with Cara Powell to talk more about this whole growing young thing and also how we've been emotionally impacted in this time of crisis. So right now, today though, I hope you enjoy this webinar with Dr. Allan Martin and that you are blessed by what he brings to you. We will talk more at the end as we have some question and answer time. And thanks for joining us on this Zoom webinar.
Well, hey, good to see all of you. Well, not really see you all, but glad to be in this same Zoom webinar with you today. I'm wondering while we're getting started here, if you just pipe up on the chat, make sure to feel free to share your comments, share your witticisms, share your critiques of the webinar. Just feel comfortable putting stuff up there. I am here in North Central Texas, so welcome. Greetings from the Republic of Texas. I'm wondering where you all are from and eager to see where you're dialing in from, and maybe even just share a little bit about, what is your involvement in youth and young adult ministry. Truth be told, I'm a local pastor like some of you all. I serve at the Arlington Seventh-day Adventist Church here in North Central Texas, right between Dallas and Fort Worth. And it's been my privilege to work predominantly in focusing in on young adult ministry. So would love to get to know you all better, and I'm hoping that showing up on your screen. My email address should be there as part of my profile name. Feel free to send me email. Yes, some of us still use email, and I'm one of those people. So I'm eager to tell you a little bit more about growing young. Now, I'm going to just start off with a preface in regards to this so that you understand where this information is coming from. But Growing Young was a book published by Fuller Youth Institute about 3 years ago, the result of about 3 or 4 years of research that they did. Now, most of the research I've seen oftentimes has focused in on the bad news, right? So most of our churches are experiencing a situation where young people are no longer a part of their local church. They kind of put, as Barna says, put their faith on the shelf once they graduate from high school or from college. And so I've seen probably about a good 5 decades of research showing the variety of reasons why young people are leaving the church. Now, in addition to research that's looking at the problem and stating the problem and what we're doing wrong, Fuller did something which I thought was really beneficial in their most recent research to put together the Growing Young book. They did exemplar research, which is basically saying, in addition to looking at why young people are leaving the church, why don't we kind of take a look at the broad Protestant landscape and find churches that are actually attracting young people, that are actually thriving and growing. And hence Growing Young was released in 2017. When this was released, we had a great interest in it because we had heard the bad news, but we were eager to find out what was actually working in local churches. So I'm going to pull up a little keynote presentation here to go along with what I'm sharing here. I hope that you'll find it beneficial. And my intent here is to take a look at what it is that helps our churches grow. So I'm hoping that you'll find this beneficial, and certainly I won't be able to see the chat, so I'm eager for Pastor Ryan to moderate and give us a little bit of feedback in regards to that. Like Pastor Ryan said, Growing Young Adventists is the name of the initiative that we're doing with our faith community. The research that I'll be sharing with you applies to all denominations. It was done by Fuller Youth Institute. But in order to help our faith community of Seventh-day Adventists better grasp it, we've kind of created our own little moniker for it called Growing Young Adventists. And today I'm really grateful to the Revive Youth Rally for sponsoring our webinar. Now, here's the reality for me. I'm not sure what your reality is, but you'll see here in this photo, there are people in this photo that are about the same size. That's my family. And my daughter was graduating with her Bachelor of Science in Nursing. But we've had to incorporate this other guy. I don't know how he snuck into our photos, but I've had to define my reality that somewhere along the way in my daughter's college career, she met a boy. Now, some of you are still denying that that's going to happen, but for me, I've come to the realization that we're going to have to define our reality as not just three of us, but there's another guy, another man in my household now that is actually moving up the ranks. This summer, COVID permitting, he's going to move into a whole nother class of relationship with our family. You'll see here, as we were celebrating Alexa's graduation, that at one juncture, she was able to wear my regalia as a little baby girl. And I blinked, and just like that, Ryan, just like that, she's now graduating with her BSN. She's been working actually for the past year as a full-fledged young adult, making her own money, but she still finds my text number and asks me if I have money laying around in the house. I don't know how that happens. But I blinked again, and just like that, she is engaged to be married this summer, Lord willing, right? So if we're wise, we have to define our reality. The reality is that my daughter is getting married. I'm going to have to adjust to the reality that there's going to be this other guy in our household, but fortunately he likes basketball just as much as I do. And so that's a good thing. But as we start this webinar, I think it's important for us to understand, and the words of Max Dupree ring true here, is that the first job of leaders is to define reality. You know, some of us will move forward and we'll just do what we've always done, or we'll do what was always done previous to us. But I believe that that's part of the irrelevance and part of the reason why our faith communities are beginning to dwindle, is that we haven't really taken a look at the reality. So I'm going to share a little bit of reality check news for you, but most of this you probably already know. One of the things that we know here in the North American division, and we contextualize that as meaning in the area where we have responsibility as the Adventist Church, but for the sake of this reality check, that comprises the United States, Canada, Bermuda, Micronesia, and Guam. Here is the truth, okay? Here's the reality. No major Christian tradition in this territory that we're in, no major Christian tradition in the United States is growing. No major Christian tradition in the United States, Canada, Bermuda, Micronesia, and Guam is growing. If anything, they are holding steady or declining. Now, some of you will look at the research and say, well, for the Seventh-day Adventists, it looks like you guys are increasing. Well, if you were to take a careful look at our statistics, just because we really don't have any bragging rights compared to the Methodists or the non-denominationals or the Baptists, we would attribute any growth that we have to transfer growth. In other words, there are faithful Seventh-day Adventists in other countries that are immigrating to our territory here, and that would be the benefactor of any uptick in regards to quote-unquote growth. That's what we would call transfer growth. Another thing that you may have seen in national public radio, it hasn't been talked about a lot lately because COVID has taken over the headlines, is that there is this group called the religious nuns. Now we have to make sure that we spell that right. It's not N-U-N-S. It is nuns, N-O-N-E-S. So when they fill out their surveys or they fill out their census forms and they're asked about their religious affiliation, it has steadily grown from year to year in regards to these inquiries of individuals that say that they have no religious affiliation whatsoever. In my context here, and I know that I've compared it to the research that was put together by Barna and also certainly the citations by Fuller Youth Institute, we have, like I mentioned earlier here, we have talked about over and over again the reality that people are leaving our church, and in particular, youth and young adults. So in the Seventh-day Adventist context, since 1965, we've had an attrition rate, which is basically people leaving the church at about 40%. At our most recent annual meetings where we gather a whole world church, the statisticians estimate that about 15,132,555 people, based on that 40% attrition rate, have left the church that were at one time affiliated with our faith community. I worked that out in regards to young adults because that's my particular interest area. And it comes out to, and this is a staggering number for me, 9,609,172 people when they were young adults decided to leave my faith community. Now put that into context with our other faith communities that may be represented out there. This 40% attrition rate goes up to almost 70% for some of our communities. Ed Stetzer out of Lifeway Research put it at about 69%. So this is a reality that we are facing across the broad band of Christian faith communities that are realizing that young people are not a part of our church in the ways that we would hope. In fact, many are leaving. But what if I was to tell you, in the midst of all this bad news, you're probably saying to yourself at this point, thanks a lot, Ryan, for putting this together. This guy's a real thriller in regards to sharing great news with us. But what if I was to tell you that this isn't the whole story? Now, that is the reality, but what if I was to tell you that there's more to the story than what's being shared here? I love this clip because it gives us that what if and helps us to explore it a little bit further.
What if? What if it's not that out of reach? What if love became reality? What if our church was the best place for generations to grow together? What if it's not that out of reach? What if? Where Jesus is lifted high, where neighbors become family, where children become leaders, where age is truly just a number. Growing Young Adventist is a journey towards establishing a thriving local church that will impact their community for generations to come. An intergenerational movement that celebrates young people and their faith. GYA is here to help local churches every step of the way, providing mentorship, materials, and ministry training that leads to loving next generations better. Let's make our church the best place for generations to grow together.
I so love that clip because it gives us a hopeful sense in the midst of all the challenges that all of us are facing in ministry today. And so that's where we are looking at Growing Young, the book. So if you haven't checked it out yet, you can check it out on Amazon.com. You can go to churchesgrowingyoung.com and take a look at the background in regards to the book. If you don't have a book, Pastor Ryan will be more than happy to make sure you get a book or know where to get one. So in regards to this book that was released in 2017, the basic definition that they have for this term, growing young, is this: churches that are not shrinking and aging, but are growing and involving and retaining young people. They studied predominantly those ages 15 to 29, which brings overall vitality to the whole church. And I think that word vitality is super important, okay? Because sometimes what happens, well, you see the title Growing Young, oh, well, this is just for youth ministry. But kind of prefacing what Pastor Hodgkins shared at the very first, this is about the whole church feeling themselves becoming more vital and more vibrant. And so that's a real big aspect as we're taking a look at the various findings that are listed in the Growing Young book. Now, we have to break through some of the myths because some of these myths have actually been very detrimental to the relationship of young people to the church. So I'm going to zip through these, but what are the qualities that your church doesn't need to grow young? These are listed in the Growing Young book at more length, but I'm going to zip through these so you have a sense of what are some of the myths as to the recipe for a successful church that has youth and young adults in it. Well, I will go through these quickly. the research does not show that you need to, in order to grow young, to be a certain size church. It doesn't matter whether you're a small church, a medium-sized church, or a large church. That is not found to be a required characteristic in order to grow young. You don't have to be in a certain location or region. You don't have to be in the city or the country or the suburb in order for your church to grow young. You don't have to have a particular age congregation. You may be a brand new church plant, or you may be an established congregation that has decades, if not hundreds of years of history in your location. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be a specific denomination in order to grow young. The non-denoms or the Presbyterians don't have a head start on us in regards to the idea of growing young. And you don't have to be a cool church where, you know, your pastor is required to wear skinny jeans. It's not part of the requirement in order to growing young. Some other things that you don't need in order to grow young is you don't need a certain size building or a certain style. It doesn't have to be modern, or it doesn't have to be postmodern. It doesn't have to be ancient future. Now, this is a big one. This is a big one that people think, well, we have to have a ginormous youth budget in order to grow young. The research doesn't show that you have to have a certain specific size of budget. Now, it will say, the book will say that wherever you and your church put your money, that shows where your priorities are, but no specific size of budget is necessary in order to grow young. No particular worship style has been found to be a crucial characteristic in regards to growing young. Some people feel like, oh, you know, the young people will come if we just share with them a couple of skits and some games, throw a pie in the youth pastor's face. That's how they come. But the research doesn't indicate that a watered down teaching approach is necessary to grow young, nor does it have to be a hyper entertaining program. So we've zipped through all these things that you don't need to grow young. I'm wondering if you have questions about that and so forth, and we'll have a Q&A time at the end. But maybe there are some questions that you have in regards to some of the myths that exist as to what is necessary to grow young. Well, the Fuller Youth Institute in the book Growing Young have found out, they've identified 6 core commitments that are beneficial and helpful, that they found as essential principles and strategies that were happening in these best practice churches that were growing young. They had over 200 churches that they looked at as per recommendations, that these are vital churches that are growing, and it's super exciting that these churches are growing. And they've distilled it into these 6 core commitments that I'm going to zip through again to give you an overview of these things. Now, before I get to this, it's important for you to brace yourselves, because none of these characteristics, these core commitments, are rocket science, okay? These are things that you're probably saying in your mind, no duh, but I will share with you that as they looked at, as they interviewed, they spent thousands, tens of thousands of hours interviewing these churches. They spent time assessing it. They did site visits. They found that these core commitments were found in these churches that were thriving. So please brace yourself. That you say, oh no, I wasted my time talking with this guy here or having this guy talk to me, because I knew these things all along. But I want you to be able to just kind of just sit in and kind of lean into these commitments, because I think they're super valuable as you look at your church and how to grow young in your context. So here's the 6 core commitments. Here's the drum roll portion. These are the things that are necessary in order for a church to grow young. Number 1, unlock keychain leadership. These churches found themselves to give opportunities, purpose, and empowerment to next generations to be part of the leadership. They had mentorship happening where young people were given an opportunity to be a part of leadership and not just simply sitting on the sidelines waiting for their turn. Empathize with today's young people. More than just saying, hey, I sympathize with your situation or I feel bad for you. There was an intentional act of listening that was happening in these churches that allowed them to understand as best as they could from the stories of next generations what they were going through. What young people are going through today is so very different from what maybe you and I as older generations experienced in our time. I mean, just the emphasis of that reality is coming to us in the midst of this pandemic era that we're in the midst of. Their stress and anxiety is very different from ours. Empathizing with today's young people. Taking Jesus' message seriously. Now, so for some of you, you say, amen, that's what we've always done. But taking Jesus' message seriously talks more than just us having a robust Christocentric theology. It's about the practicing of Jesus's discipleship in real life, fueling warm relationships. We know for a fact that if your church has people that embrace others, that has the ability to create wonderful hospitality and connection points of real relationships, that young people will be drawn to your church. Prioritizing young people and families everywhere. Now, this is where it gets a little bit sticky, because some of you that are more established in the church or are adults are saying, well, what about me? This is not to put adults or older adults or senior adults on the sideline, but this is to indicate that as a part of the regular rhythm of church life, young people and families aren't a second thought and aren't put off into some closet that's being used as a youth room. It's not some type of extracurricular activity. Young people and young families are a part of the very center of church life. And then finally, being the best neighbors. Being the best neighbors is one of the greatest opportunities for you to show that your church is legit. Young people are far more interested in regards to the impact that your church has in the surrounding neighborhood than they are in regards to the other facets that are a part of the myths as to what would actually attract young people. So those are the 6 core commitments. I'm wondering, and certainly you can pop it up on the chat here, any of them that struck you as surprising, or maybe you have some questions about it, we'll definitely take a look at those questions at the tail end of this webinar. So we've gone through these here, and Fuller's kind of put it into a nice kind of format here, and what they call the growing young wheel. And you can see that each one of these core commitments follows along in this wheel, and you see this little thing where it says growing old, okay? So I think it's important for you to get a sense and kind of get a picture of what this is about. If you want the PDF that has this growing young wheel, I'll be happy to send it to you. Just send me an email. I'll be happy to send you the PDF document that has this. But each one of these serves to keep the church growing and cycling in rhythm and moving with momentum towards growing young. Now, it's important to understand that there is this shell, this light green shell, for us to understand that each one of these 6 core commitments has to happen in your context, okay? What works for my church at Younger Generation Church will not necessarily work where you're at. What works in North Central Texas may not work in North Carolina, okay? So it's important to understand that although these are core commitments that have been shown by the research to work to help your church grow young, you have to contextualize it to the contours, to the experience of your local church, your local community, your local setting. Another aspect in regards to the growing young wheel, I know that we said that taking Jesus' message seriously as one of the core commitments, it makes it sound like it's just one of 6 things that we can do to kind of get young people to come to our church. That's not the case. It was found as basically the very foundation of the church. If the church is going to have vitality, if people will be drawn to it, including young people, young families, young adults, Christ has to be at the very center of that community, okay? So this brings to our question here, is our church about programs, or is our church about Jesus? Is our church about the fun activities or the attractive worship services, or is it about Jesus? We know from the scriptures that if Jesus is lifted high, all people will be drawn to him. And it's important for us to understand that in a growing young church, Jesus is at the very center of the wheel of the commitments. And then I did mention earlier, and I'm going to turn back to that for just a moment here. At any juncture in regards to the growing young wheel, you can jump off the wheel at any point, and you will naturally grow old. Okay, this is a phenomenon that happens to every church. Right now, Pastor Ryan, as we're sitting here, is growing older as we speak. Okay, that happens to him, that happens to me, that happens to all of us. So if you decide, hey, you know what, we're going to do a couple of things, but we really don't want to commit to them. If you jump off, so let's say doing warm relationships, we just want to be with our people. We really don't want new people. And babies are such a hassle because they cry and they excrete things. If you decide at any juncture that you're not going to do one of the commitments or any of the commitments, by the nature of nature, your church will naturally grow old. So know that these commitments are helpful, they're beneficial, but they have to be an ongoing, organic, cultural part of who your church is on a regular, daily, almost on a DNA basis. It has to be in the very fiber of who you are. Otherwise, your church will naturally grow old. I will share this with you because many of you are coming here because you're youth and young adult ministry specialists. In regards to this idea of Jesus at the very center of your community, what they are emphasizing, Fuller Youth Institute, in their research, although they're giving us points for youth ministry equipping, pursuing Jesus, not just young people, is the heart of churches growing young. I really want to emphasize that because sometimes we just get kind of mesmerized by the latest gizmo or methodology in order for us to feel like we're doing youth ministry. If you are pursuing Jesus at the very heart of your church, God will do miraculous things with your congregation that you could not have imagined, dreamt up, or followed a recipe in order to see it grow young. So I'm just going to go over this real quickly with you, just so that you understand this idea. I think you're getting the context of it, but in regards to growing young, the research is not about changing youth and young adult ministry. And in our context for our faith community as Adventists, we're not about just simply trying to make things cooler or make things more attractive to young people. We're talking about the complete transformation of local church culture. So I'm going to give you an example, okay? This is a picture. Is it okay if I show? I know this is self-serving in so many ways. I apologize. But I'm going to show you a couple of photos of how we were sharing Growing Young with our local church here at Younger Generation Church. If you want more information on that, check out ygchurch.com. But these are my young adult leaders. I asked my young adult leaders to come up front, and I mentioned to you earlier that one of the core commitments is key chain leadership, right? So imagine, if you will, that you're a part of this worship service. I'm preaching about growing young. I have the book in hand, and I call up all of our young adult leaders up front and ask my young adult leaders, I had up on my little table there, a set of keys. Now, the keys were defective. So I went to all the hardware stores and Lowe's and Home Depots in the area and got these keys. So I had a whole bunch of these keys that didn't go to anything per se. And here's my young adult leaders picking them up, just as a way by which to illustrate this with your congregation, because I know that these concepts, you say, oh, this is a no-duh idea, but you have to share it with your congregation in order to get church transformation to happen. I asked my young adult leaders to pick up one of these keys and go out into the congregation and pass one of these keys to someone that's younger than them, okay? Now you imagine in this transaction between this young adult leader and a teenager or a preteen, how powerful it's shared, how important they could be in regards to the church by giving them this key of authority, this key of responsibility, or just noticing that they exist. Again, utilizing object lessons, preaching in your sermons, and creating a sermon series around growing young are great ways by which to share this value and the various commitments of growing young with your congregation. Let me use this as the context here. Okay, so I love this because, you know, right now you're sensing, oh, well, Pastor Ryan's pretty young, and Pastor Allan, well, he's not really young, but he sounds very energetic. And you think, well, we just need an energetic youth pastor to help us with youth ministry, or we just need to have someone that's a great youth leader with great charisma, or knows how to mesmerize the young people to make them a part of our church. And I want to encourage you that that is not the context that's necessary. No age has been eliminated from having a chance to get excited about young people being a part of their church. And so I love this video for that fact alone. When I said about keychain leadership, I think you can probably imagine me preaching about it and sharing keys with the congregation and utilizing my young adult leaders as examples of it. But any church, any size can get super enthusiastic about it. And I love the video I'm going to share with you because it shares the enthusiasm of a small church in Florida, Homosassa Seventh-day Adventist Church, that caught the vision of making their church grow young.
We have an older membership. I think probably 75 years would be an average. And for a period of 6 or 8 years, we prayed for more young people, more children, more youth. And we would have some come for a little while and then leave. And the last 3 years, we've been truly blessed, in part by Diane Fisher.
I found this church through the food pantry. We were in need, and I came to this food pantry, and then I decided, well, I'm going to give this church a try, and I did. And they're just welcomed me with open arms, and then I started bringing my grandkids here.
It is a very welcoming environment. Everybody on Sabbath will come and greet you, and just very warm.
And whenever you walk in a church, like if you smile at somebody, they're going to smile back at you. Like no one is like distant. We're all just get along.
On like during the week, they'll call you, and like people at the church will just call you and ask you if you're doing okay and all that.
What we found is children beget children. If you have some and they sell your church, then others come.
How I started to go to the church was my sister Alexis. She asked me, hey, do you want to come to church one day? And I was like, okay, I'll see what it's like. And at first I was really nervous, and then I met Sue and Bob, and I was like, whoa, I love this. And all the people were sweet and kind, and I learned a lot, and it made me feel more connected. We've been bringing friends and siblings and cousins and stuff like that. What I usually tell them to get them motivated to come to church is, well, there's some really nice people here, and God is a big part of your life. He loves you, He sees you every day, He makes sure you're okay, and if you come to church, you can be so much more connected with God than you already are.
And I think one of the things we learned from the other youth that we had here, that we never, I like to say, gave them the keys to the church. We welcomed them, we let them do it. We never gave them something to do. And so this time we've given them something to do, and we let them tell us what they wanted to do. We have a schedule of activities. They prepare it. They got to be part of the church. If they're going to stay here, they've got to be part of the church family. So not short, but a simple answer is give them the keys to the church.
How I've become an owner of the church. I feel like once I got baptized, I felt so connected with everybody, even more than I already felt, and I felt like maybe if I get a job, I'd be 10 times more connected, and I can make everybody see that I love you guys. I want to be here, I want to spend time with you, I want to learn about God with you, and I think I've definitely brought that out on everyone.
I've learned like a sense of like responsibility. Like I feel responsible, and I feel like I can pretty much do anything with the church because I know they have my back.
I learned to be very kind and caring, and also responsible, and to take care of the church.
They've come a long way, because I never thought I would have seen my grandkids studying openly the Bible in a fast food restaurant. But we go and we do it, and they have no problem with it. So that's awesome.
And they're the future of this church. The people like myself and other members, and if this church is going to survive, then these young people are going to be the ones that lead it into the future. Don't stand back and say, we used to do it this way, so you've got to do it this way. That's not going to win any souls. That's not going to win any souls. I don't care how old you are, and I keep harping on this, the leaders and the older people that are sitting back fussing about things, they can take a leadership role. Mentor a young person. It's kind of a two-way street. You want them to be part of the church family. Okay, bring them into your heart. Bring them into your heart. If anybody tells me they're too old to work with young people, come see me, okay? I'd be more than happy to tell them out. So.
I love that part where Bob says, if you want them to be a part of the church, bring them into your heart, make them a part of your heart. I think these are very simple concepts that all of us kind of know about, but that transformation of culture to make the 6 commitments a part of how your church operates can be so powerful. Did you see a lot of those commitments in the midst of that video? Everything from being the best neighbor to giving them the keys to the church. Michaela is an elder in their church. How in the world did that happen? The opportunity of prioritizing young people everywhere so that grandma brings children, and children, it's just a phenomenal thing of the vitality that can happen in your church if youth ministry left the youth room and became a part of the culture happening in every aspect of your faith community. So you're probably wondering to yourself, okay, Allan, thank you so very much for this infomercial. Why is Growing Young Adventist or Growing Young so important to you? Well, I have to share with you the story of my daughter. When I was doing some church planting in Orlando, well, not Orlando, Central Florida, right near Disney World. Some of you have gone to Disney World. I know you haven't gone lately because Disney World's closed. But we were church planting in a little town called Celebration, right there near Disney World. And during this time in Florida, some of you have heard of hurricanes. Ryan, you guys have hurricanes where you're at there, sort of? Yeah, well, in Florida, it's a regular occurrence. We have hurricane season almost every year. But it's very rare that the hurricanes come through Central Florida, much less 3 hurricanes intersecting right there in Central Florida. And as my daughter, Alexa, here, you can see her in the photograph, was looking at the news as I was watching the news, she noticed this issue in regards to Hurricane Charlie. And she said, Dad, I want to sell lemonade. I said, why sell lemonade? Why do you want to sell lemonade? Well, I want to help those people that got hurt by Hurricane Charlie. She was still very young. I loved her heart, bless her heart. You know, in the South, you say, bless your little heart. It's like, you know, it means all kinds of different things, which is a whole nother webinar. But I said, bless your little heart. And so she made her sign, and I got her a little bucket to gather money. She was going to sell the lemonade. I said, don't sell the lemonade, sweetheart, because you're not going to make a lot of money doing that. Just ask for donations and give people free lemonade. Okay, now I'm going to admit, okay, I am admitting here on this webinar that the lemonade was not that good. Okay, I'm the one that made the lemonade. It's that powdered stuff, you know, and then you put ice in it and it turns out probably pretty watery. But I set her up on the street corner there with her sign and with her donation bucket. And she gathered in donations with my awful lemonade, $150. $150. She was really super excited about that. She was being the best neighbor before we even had the research out and so forth. And I just love that heart about her. She took that money, and one of the community foundations was going to match that money and send it to the Red Cross. And so this little girl with her little bucket with horrible dad-made lemonade raised $300 to give to the Red Cross. And that just moves my heart. Now, obviously, I blinked, and that little girl became a high school student. And I blinked again, and that little girl that was a high school student now is a college student. And okay, again, without any shame at all, I'm sharing with you this video as to that little girl that was helping out Hurricane Charlie victims, didn't lose her desire to help out people. And this is what she did while she was in college.
Jen and I were scrolling through Instagram during class one day, and we saw a picture of a bunch of elderly in a nursing home up to waist in water after Hurricane Harvey had hit Houston. And we had been hearing about the disasters that had been going on down there, but we didn't realize how bad they were until we saw that image. And after we saw that, we realized that we needed to do something.
The main purpose of this event was just to raise money as best as we could. We didn't have any set amount in mind. We're just like, we need to do something.
We titled our event the Hurricane Relief Benefit, and we had multiple activities going on the day of. The biggest draw for people to come was to sell baked goods, and we involved the community by encouraging them to not only come and purchase baked goods, but to also bake items and bring them to the event to sell to others. We also invited Blood Assurance to come out. They brought a huge blood mobile, and individuals were allowed to donate blood during this time, and that blood also went to hurricane victims.
We sold t-shirts made by Casey. She's one of our art students.
We also had live music at the event. Student musicians, alumni, CA students, and current Southern students all came and performed. We raised around $3,700, and over 70 people donated blood, and both barrels that the Samaritan Center brought to the event were full of cleaning supplies at the end of the day.
The church was very supportive. We definitely couldn't have done it without our different pastors.
I really admire their willingness to be a part of something to help those who are not in our immediate community. I feel like Southern supported me in this initiative by allowing it to be student-led. That's the biggest thing that I loved about being a part of this is it was completely up to Jen and I whatever we wanted to do, and the multiple departments on campus that supported us just supplied whatever we needed. I really admire Southern for not trying to take over our initiative, but just supporting us through providing whatever resources and means we needed to make this event happen.
it was just really incredible just to see the community, to see Southern just come and support us and uphold us, really, and just turn our entire idea into an incredible event.
Isn't that great? A little girl that wanted to help Hurricane Charlie. Now, I don't recommend college students scroll through Instagram in the middle of class, but they saw this need. And when they saw this need, they wanted to make a difference. I love that spirit about young adults. I love that spirit about young people. They just need an opportunity to make a difference in the world, to be the best neighbor, to be able to share warm community, to be a part of a church that is going to allow them to do that. You can see here they were able to raise $3,500 plus. The best part of it is they gathered and they rallied their classmates to take part in this endeavor, and the entire community had an opportunity to make a difference. Now, here's the challenge for me and why this is so important to me. The reason that this is so important to me is because my daughter, my reality is changing. My daughter that was just a little pipsqueak of a girl selling lemonade on the corner became a high school student, became a college student, and met a boy. And now I have no control as to where in the world this boy and this girl that I raised will land. But I need for your church to be a growing young church that will give her an opportunity to expand the kingdom of God, to continue on with this desire to be the best neighbor that's in her heart. And so that's part of the reason why I'm doing this. It's pretty selfish, I admit, but I need to see hundreds of churches all around the United States that are growing young churches that will welcome and embrace young lives and young people and young families to make a difference for the cause of Christ. That's why we're bringing this presentation to you. I hope that it's been beneficial to you. If you want to get in touch with us, find out a little bit more about what we're doing. Again, like Pastor Ryan said, this is open to all denominations. We just use this moniker because this is our website, not the official Fuller Youth Institute website. So find us on social media and take a look at what we have. And as a special gift for you all joining us today, oh, you know what? I'm going to save that announcement for after our question and answer time. Is that okay? Ooh, that's a little bit of a teaser, isn't it? But yeah, so here's my contact information. I would be delighted to hear back from you. You can find me on social media, but email is the way that I'll probably most likely get back to you. Feel free to get in touch with me. Would love to share more about what we're doing with Growing Young Adventists and what we're doing in our local church to make our church the best place for all generations to grow together. Hey, thank you so very much for this. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is, if I can kick out of here, I can find my little deal here, is we're going to stop sharing. And Pastor Ryan, would you lead us through any questions? Or if you have questions, feel free to pop them up on here. I'd be glad to field a couple of questions or give a little more information as to what we're doing with Growing Young Adventists.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions right now, just feel free to put them in the chat, and Allan or myself will answer them and do our best to help you along the way. We both have a fair amount of experience with Growing Young and research into that stuff. So,
I want to start off with a question for you, Pastor Ryan. I was really amazed. A lot of the things that the pandemic has shown us, we've been talking with our pastoral team here, is it's kind of shown us the fault lines in regards to what we've just been doing out of the routine of ministry. And one of the big kind of scary things for us is that that there is this fear that the giving or the financial support of the church would wane because we're not having regular worship services and so forth. And I don't know where we were, but you were sharing a little bit of where you are and the dynamics of your church. And right now you claim that giving may have even actually not just stayed stable, but may have increased. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I think that's pretty relevant right now.
Yeah, so traditionally we have I'm the associate, the youth and young adult pastor at a church of about 900 and some members. And every year we notice right from February on, we don't meet church budget. We're always down on church budget. By the end of the year, we're trying to figure out how are we going to meet this budget? What is our giving looking like and things like that. And so we've explored, getting different giving platforms, whether, there's some of the big names ones, like if you want to throw a push pay or some of these other ones, just to try to encourage easier giving.
Right.
But we've not actually bit the bullet and gone that way, mostly for the price. Some of those giving platforms are fairly expensive. And so we've just been, of late, what we did before the pandemic is we've really been upfront going, hey, you know, there's this app, Adventist Giving. You can go on there, download it right now. You can sign in, whatever. And we noticed a little bit of increase then, but not huge. And then since the pandemic, we were worried, just like every other church, that our giving was going to drop. And we're like, how are we going to deal with this and stuff? And it's funny because we've actually experienced our giving has gone up significantly. And I'm not sure if it's just the area that we're in, and some of the industries here have not been hit really well. But a lot of our people in our church are bankers, and they are still working. But we have our increase. We have met our church budget to this point in the year, and we're actually above it now, which has been an absolute blessing. But I think what it attributes to is we have made a push, even since the pandemic, to encourage people to give. Go on your phones, go on the website and give. We're actually only receiving checks for regular giving, maybe like 9 a month. We're not actually getting that much. So almost all the giving has transmitted to the online platform. And we're just amazed by how much giving has come in, but it's been a blessing, and we hope it stays that way.
Yeah, see, the big point in regards to that is that one of the big issues that people have is, if you focus in on the young people, they don't make money. So focus in on the older generations and you know, do the programming that the older generations like, because, you know, young people don't give. But here's the miraculous thing. Every one of those older generation folks has a grandkid or has a niece or a nephew. They have young people that they believe in. I heard of a church in Atlanta that they started off and they were really concerned. It was a Korean church, a Korean ethnic church, and they were really concerned because, you know, their major stable givers, the faithful givers that give on a regular basis, they were concerned when they made more emphasis in regards to prioritizing youth and young adults and young families more in their church, that those faithful givers may not give as much, or may end up hurting them because they're not receiving the services of ministry that they're used to. And I remember Pastor Justin Yang sharing with us, as a result of within 2 years of giving a all church focus, but giving special emphasis to prioritizing youth and young families, they actually saw the young families and the young people outpace the older givers in the church.
Yeah, and we've seen our young people, especially the ones that are young professionals, like if they've moved out of school, are starting to give more. But one of the things we've also seen is that as we encourage our young people and we do more things for the young people in our church, that there actually is more support from the older generations to back that up, which is pretty awesome, because it shows that those people want to see young people in the church and they want to see them involved. I don't know if you can see the questions, Allan, but we do have a question that came in. This is from Felipe. It says, definitely motivated through the concept of keychain leadership. I'm currently at a church where youth have been groomed in a consumer mentality. When it comes to church and even youth ministry, any tips to help transition youth into this core value?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Felipe. Appreciate you bringing that up. And certainly anyone else that has questions, pipe it up here. I see there might be a question on the Q&A board as well.
Yeah.
This is the part that I think is super important to understand in regards to making this transition. You're absolutely right, is that we're learning here, especially during the pandemic, that the church may have been built off of a consumeristic mindset, that if you give me programs, then I will support you, right? But the challenge is that many of our young people are digital natives, are screenagers, the millennials and Gen Zs. They're activists. They want to see a church that's making a difference. And so, yes, it's been groomed into that area of, in regards to, well, you come, you'll have a great time at youth group, and so you'll give money. Here's a great suggestion that I would offer to you. If your church would give an opportunity for all generations to do anything that is geared towards helping individuals on the margin, something to be the best neighbor, it's a great opportunity for older and younger generations to roll up their sleeves side by side and provide help and support. I know that a lot of our churches are opting right now to help with in regards to distribution of food for food banks. I know that there's a variety of churches that are helping the homeless that aren't getting the same services that they got pre-COVID-19. This is an opportunity where your generations of folks are no longer individuals that are just simply receiving programs, but they're actually going outside and beyond the building to be the church. The moment they get a little bit of a taste of being Jesus's hands and feet, their lives transform. And so, yes, you're going to continue to provide the programming that you typically do, but in this program that you're doing, as opposed to just a consumer mindset, give a challenge to individuals. Say, hey, this weekend, we're going to do something with our community to help benefit the community and just build relationships. Pre-COVID, I'm going to give you one quick illustration here. I know we're almost running out of time here. Pre-COVID, we have our youth ministry, and they do this awesome thing with one of the assisted living centers. They've actually gone to this assisted living center, and as opposed to just singing songs and leaving, they've intentionally, month after month, gone back to this assisted living center to build relationships with the residents. And one of the things they did I thought was super fun, and I thought it was actually kind of humorous, is they simply went there with the intent of painting fingernails, doing kind of, is it manicures? Not pedicures. Manicures for the residents of the assisted living center. So you have these young people, they're in conversation with these older generations, and they're doing the nails of the residents. But it was not just the females. The guys wanted clear coats on their nails and to have manicures as well. And can you imagine in that experience of serving that population, especially in this season where our most vulnerable populations, as we have opportunity, hopefully here in the near future for some reopenings, to provide some contact and some relationship, it moves the mindset of your local church from being a consumeristic church to a how can I help church, to a be the church mentality. And it's something that the entire all generations can benefit from. Hey, Felipe, if you want some more ideas in regards to it and have some further dialogue, I'd be happy for us to have some email conversation about that. Any other questions?
I've also noticed along that mindset too, if one of the things that helps get the church that way and the young people, because a lot of times the young people are just used to consuming, is asking them what they want. Asking them what they would like to see happen and what they want to see happen. Let's move on to our next question. In the Q&A, Jonathan asks if you experience, in your experience, is it better or easier to transition an existing open but traditional church to growing young, or a plant in a new church with this DNA?
Oh, that's great. That's a great question there. So just the bare pragmatics of it, if you have an opportunity with a church plant, to put it into the DNA at the very start, so it's part of the culture, that is a great way to go because you're not fighting against old DNA. Does that make sense? But the challenge is even with a church plant, you have people that are part of your faith community that aren't brand new and they don't know your culture. So they will bring their spliced DNA into your church. So no matter whether you're a new church plant or you're an established congregation with kind of the routines of what you do, you're going to run into your obstacles. But if you have an opportunity, we just recently supported a church plant in South Korea. And what they did is to start their church, they went through, they did a sermon series, they read the book so they could start off with the DNA at the very start. But as you know, as Andy Stanley says, vision leaks. So you have to continue to repeat the massaging and the culture, the curating of that culture on a regular basis. In older churches, your biggest challenge, I think, is helping individuals understand that this change in culture doesn't necessarily mean loss. There is an old adage that says, well, not necessarily that old, is that people are not so much fearful of change as they're fearful of loss. And so in your more established congregations, if they understand, oh, well, this is just for the young people, or they go with the stereotypes of how this may put them on the margin and they're no longer in power, it can be very intimidating for your older generations. But I encourage those of you that are considering growing young, that you go through a very gentle process so you don't give your older generations whiplash. This is for the long haul. This is not the sprint that you're going to change everything right now, immediately. We are looking to transform our culture to expand the kingdom and have more of our young families and young people integrally involved with our local church. So it's perfectly possible, in fact, probably thrives in a local church that's established, as long as you have someone like Bob or several of the leaders that buy into this idea that this is for the benefit of what our church is so that we can grow and become more vital. If they don't have that idea and it becomes a, basically a tension point where people are going to fight, then I would recommend not doing anything. Don't do anything to create friction between younger people and your older generations. There's far too much division in this world without you putting your local church into the latest battlefield.
It's also interesting. I've seen this as, I've pastored in fairly, I guess you could call it, contemporary churches and traditional churches. And one of the things that I've seen across the board, if you ask just about anybody, if you want more young people in the church, they always say yes. They always say yes. Now, they may not know what that looks like, or they may think that to you that means, hey, let's bring in a praise band and let's do this. But a while ago, I was actually going to preach at a convention about church growth, and they asked me to speak on kind of this growing young mentality. And one of the things that I was going to present to them, the event got canceled because of COVID, but one of the things I was going to present to them was that growing young doesn't necessarily mean changing the way that your church is in like a worship standpoint. A lot of times people think when you say growing young, they think that you mean you have to compromise or whatever. But it's more so about those 6 core principles than it is about changing your beliefs.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Pastor Ryan, in that oftentimes we want to go for the big enchilada first, and we want to put change underneath the hot spotlight of our worship services, because that's what's going to really attract the young people. Friends, the myths are well stated in the book. Read the book. The worship service is not the main attraction for young people. So if you're bringing change, and this is just a recommendation, if you're bringing change, what the authors of the book suggest is experiment on the margins, okay? In other words, if you have some great innovation that you want to try out, do it in a place which is lower threat, less of a hot spotlight, because whenever you do things that are new and different, you will have some successes, but you will also have failures. You don't want to put your young people or your innovators or your church leaders are trying to put growing young together in a situation where their failure is under the hot spotlight where everyone can judge them, right? So do things in the experiment in the margins in such a way that you'll try different things and see how it feels, see what it's like. Like take, for instance, even with the idea, which music is always kind of a volatile subject, even with the idea of music, there's nothing stopping you from doing things outside of your main worship hour that really benefit young people, benefit young families, take care of the little children and so forth, in such a way that it's vibrant and contextualized worship genre, right? But if you do that in the experimental margins, it keeps there from being this big blow up based on someone feeling like they lost out on what they liked and what their preferences are in the main worship services. So I would encourage you to experiment in the margins and to see those experiments potentially grow as you change culture in your local church.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if there aren't any other questions, we'll just give you one more moment here to quickly ask. If there aren't any other questions, we'll end with a word of prayer and thank Allan. But if any questions come up real quick, we'll try to answer them quickly. It looks like we've got one more here. Adrian says, I think core principle number 1 for working with young adults, especially these days, is that we cannot place limits on how Christ will work. He was all about unconventional ways. I think that's absolutely true. I'm sure that Allan would back that up. Christ was very unconventional. We like to get certain things in our mind that only a certain way will work. But at the same time, we don't want to be so unconventional that we scare off our support either.
Well, I think that Adrian brings up a super great point and I love this idea, is that if we were to just defining our reality, the church right now, pre-COVID, pre-COVID-19, the church was perfectly calibrated for a world that no longer existed, right?
Yeah.
It was running on the fumes of ritual and not building the relationships it needed to move into the digital landscape. But so now that the church building has been vacated, what does the church look like now? And so I absolutely agree with what Adrian is sharing here and the challenge that it brings to us. is that it's not we cannot make sacred our methodology. Our theology is what is at the very core of who we are. And if Jesus is at the very core of who we are, then he is speaking in the language of the people. When he's talking about farmers, when he's talking about fruit, when he's talking about harvest, when he's talking about the rain, when he's talking about all these ideas and concepts, it's in the vernacular. It's contextualized to where the people are. And it's a powerful way by which to make a difference in people's lives. Great comment, Adrian. Love your comments always. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, we have another point. Jonathan was bringing up that they're on the North Shore in Chicago and are going through this journey, and then they stumbled across the book. I just want to encourage you guys. I mean, I don't know how many times I've already read this, but you can get it Amazon. You can get it on Scribed. If you have a subscription to Scribed, it's on there. I've listened to it a few times. So much good stuff there. But if any of you want to connect with us, like Jonathan was talking about connecting, I put our email addresses are both in the chat, the group chat there. And you can feel free to email myself or Allan, and we will help guide you on this journey. There's a lot of good common sense guidance in the book, and it's not so much that your church has to dramatically change, but sometimes it's more of a heart change than it is a methodology. But even, keep in mind, like I'm in Charlotte here, and I'm around a lot of these bigger churches, and I remember going to a thing with what is his name? James White at Met Community Church, and he was saying, and I've heard him say this over and over again, that you've got to be careful not to confuse your methodology with your theology. And methods can change, and they do. And people that get stuck on doing worship the way that we did in the 1800s, they may be missing one thing, is that Jesus didn't do worship like they're doing worship. And, if we're here, hopefully Jesus will come back sooner rather than later. But if we are here in 50 years, things will probably dramatically have changed again. It's just the reality of the world that we live in. But those 6 core principles really help with changing the mindset so that you're more relation-based and ready to go with that.
Hey, Pastor Ryan, I don't want us to miss out on an opportunity to give a gift for all of those that stuck by with us.
Absolutely.
I want to say a very special thank you to you wherever you've signed on here. And then certainly if this gets posted somewhere and you see the recording, we're just so grateful that you're considering this. One of the great resources that Fuller Youth Institute put together that is super helpful is they developed what we call a growing young assessment. It's actually a reviewed and statistical instrument that's easy to do with your congregation and with your church online or with your church leadership team or whomever. And it really helps you to see how you're doing in regards to the 6 commitments. Now, because you've come to the Revive Youth Rally sponsored webinar, I have acquired a certain amount of the individual assessments. It allows you to kind of test drive the Growing Young assessment at no cost to you. And so if Pastor Ryan has you registered, thanking you for coming and joining us. I've given him permission to give you the instructions so you can take advantage online of doing the assessment and getting all the data back, getting the suggestions that gives you back for the individual version. Okay, so that's on us as an appreciation for you all joining us today.
Yeah, I'll be sure and send that out. Keep in mind another resource that we've started is the Revive Youth Leader podcast. Which there's already a couple episodes posted. And tomorrow I actually am interviewing Cara Powell, who was one of the main authors of this book and this study. So you're going to hear more on that podcast about this. And we're also looking forward to what else she's got to say and what's to come up in the podcast. Look forward for more of these webinars. And we just thank you so much for joining us for this one. It's been a great time. And I'll be sure to send out those resources to you. Thanks again, Allan, for being with us for this. It's been great. I've learned stuff, and I know everyone that's listening has learned stuff too. Let's just close with a word of prayer again. Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for being a God who wants us to open our churches and open our hearts to young people. I praise you for calling us to grow younger, and I pray that you'll inspire us to be your people and your servants as we work with students and student leaders. And I just pray that you'll equip us for what you're dreaming. In your name we pray. Amen. Hope everyone has a great time. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.